And I promised you a packed program. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Dave Evans is, I don't know if you've heard his name before. He's a veteran Silicon Valley executive, entrepreneur, and dedicated mentor and educator. Professionally, he's had over 30 years experience as a high-tech leader. As a line executive, he led pioneering efforts at Apple Computer, including the first mouse, and was co-founder and vice president of talent for Electronic Arts, the leading game software publisher. In 1990, Dave transitioned to management consulting, working with numerous venture-backed startups and high-powered corporate clients. These days, Dave works with college students and young adults, helping them to navigate their professional formation and reflect on how to live coherent and meaningful lives. In 2007, Dave was appointed as a lecturer in the Stanford program in design, where he teaches courses that apply the innovative principles of design thinking to designing one's vocation. And he teaches an unbelievably popular class called Designing Your Life, which I think we all need to take Dave's class called Designing Your Life. He holds a BS and MS in mechanical engineering from Stanford and a graduate diploma in contemplative spirituality from San Francisco Theological Seminary. And he, like the rest of the speakers tonight, is also a parent. I think he's raised 8 kids. I'll let him talk about that in Silicon Valley. So he really knows what he's talking about. Give me a big round of applause for Mr. Dave Evans. Thank you.
Hi. So I teach in design at Stanford, and we've already broken about 15 pedagogical rules just tonight in terms of how we do that. You cannot possibly contain anything that you hear unless you engage with it and own it yourself. So for the next 37 seconds, what I want you to do is respond to this question. Think about, you all know this has happened every time you come to this kind of conference. You leave this thing, you're walking out of the car and go, what did she say? That really cool thing you heard that you really want to remember and tell your friends or your colleagues, or that really, really compelling challenge you've already heard that you know you want to do something about and not forget, okay? Think of that thing right now. That thing you don't want to forget, you already heard one of them at least. Now, stand and share it with somebody. Go, stand up right now, talk to each other, share that thing with one other person that you do not want to forget before you leave. Do it right now. Sit down. Enough of that stuff. All right. Okay. Now, who's flashing the time card? Okay, right. And I'm 10 minutes behind already, right? Okay. That's terrific. That's terrific. All right. Okay, who is this guy? Okay, yes, it's true. I was the world's first mouse product manager in 1979 on the world's first corporate culture committee at Apple in 1979. No way, please. There's so much more. No, and that's the old logo of Electronic Arts, and we actually stayed up all night long, true story, all night long arguing about whether or not the company was Electronic Art or Electronic Arts. Ask me later how we decided that's the right answer, but it is the right answer, and thank God I won that argument. So that's, you all think that's terribly important and what have you. That stuff I did a long time ago, and it doesn't matter. What's really important is this work. So those are my 3 kids, and then I have two stepkids that I didn't raise from childhood. And they're just about all married. In fact, the girl in the middle is getting married a week from tomorrow, so I'm walking my baby down the aisle 1 week from tomorrow. Yeah, that's so sweet. So the orange kid, that's David the 5th. I'm David John the 4th, and he and his lovely wife Kim have just produced David John the 6th. And then the tall guy on the other right, in the beige shirt, that's Robbie, and he and his lovely wife Chrissy, have produced our first grandson Luke, and are currently working on their second. So I'm the proud grandfather of 2.3 children. And Lisa, the little girl in the middle, now 27, is getting married in about a week, and so what I really am is a dad, just like a lot of you guys. And I know then he should want me to tell me, yes, they did all go to Stanford, okay. And they're fine, and they're happy, and they're healthy, and they're successful. And then these kids, I mean, the kids I get to work with here at Stanford, so the last 7 years I've been teaching at Stanford, and which I was amazed at. Apparently I'm an educator now because I'm speaking at an education conference at which I'm incompetent. I'm really just a marketing guy, as it turns out. But we do work with these Stanford kids and talk about how to figure out what you want to do with this one wild and wonderful life you have. And it's been kind of working well, so that's sort of how I got to be here tonight. And that came out of the fact that when I was here, back when we had pterodactyls on White Plaza, you know, in the 70s, I vividly recall being a sophomore in 19, and they were really good at teaching me stuff, and they would be really good at helping me get a job if I knew what I wanted, but taking that first thing, what I'm learning, and that second thing, what to do with it, that bridge in between, no help. You know, that was left to the reader as an exercise for a long time, which I thought was criminal, and I was actually furious about it. I'm still merely upset. And that's how I got into this. You know, I got into this for my own life. I got into this for my clients' lives. I got into all startups are trying to figure out, why are we doing this? Why are we all working 80 hours a week? What does it mean to you? You know, most of my startup founding clients, you know, will call me at least once a year at 4 in the morning because they got up and they forgot why they're doing it, and they look at the guy in the mirror, they look at the woman in the mirror, and she answers back, I don't know why I'm doing this, and can you help me? So people are struggling with this question. So the question tonight is, success by design, is it possible? I teach in the design program, so I'm supposed to know something about this. Well, the answer is yes. I'm an expert. As a matter of fact, the answer is yes. And no. Well, it depends. Okay. And what does it depend? Well, it depends on how you define what we're talking about. And of course, the critical word in success by design, is it possible, is how do we define success? Of course, that's it. No, it's wrong. That's wrong. That's not it. It's how you define design. That's the question. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. Because definitions really matter. Let me illustrate. Do you remember back when you were in high school, about 18 or whatever form of education you got before the many of you who went to university went, you know, and you got the news that you're going to get to go to college? You know, in my day, you got the thick envelope. Nowadays, you get the longer email. But whatever form of days, you go, yay, I'm in, okay, great. You know, I get to go. And then you start telling people. You start telling the adults around you you're going to college or where you're going. And then, of course, then you get feedback. So what did the adults say to you? Remember way back whenever it was, and some of you that hasn't happened yet because you're students and still junior and middle high. But for those of you who went through this, what kind of things did people say to you after you got the news you're going to college? What you're going to major in? Why the hell are you going there? And he's still not over it, okay? It's kind of like, okay, it's like, let it go. Okay, just let it go. Okay, what are you majoring in? What else did you hear? Enjoy this time. You had to get a sense it's going to be a good time? It's going to be the best years of your life? Anybody hear something like that? Yeah, who heard something like, these are the best years of your life when you go to college? Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that a fabulous thing to hear? That's just a really terrific, you know, the best years of your life, you know? I gotta be honest with you, I've been doing this slide for a long time. And I used to think it was like a West Coast or an American idiom, and I've now tested this thing literally around the world, and every single group of students I talk to, they say, yeah, that's what I heard, and for 2 seconds I was thrilled, and then I saw that thing in my head and I was terrified. Because how old are the people who are saying this stuff? You know, they're 40, they're 50, they're like, I'm 61, they're like, you know, they're way down over there, so they must know. You know, these are the people who've been on a downward slide for 45 years, and you're taking counsel from them. Okay, you know. Now, really, how many of you heard something like this when you were a kid? Right. Now, I may not ask you to raise your hands, but how many of you have said something like that? Okay, can we talk? All right, so. What were they thinking? I mean, if you actually were a person who ever said, these are the best years of your life, of course, you've reformed that. Can we have a little pledge now? We will all agree, never again will you say, these are the best years of your life. Please raise your hand if you're ready to commit with me. No, what you're supposed to say is, oh gosh, this is a lovely time. This is a great time. It's a very special time in life. You know, enjoy this experience. I hope you have a great time because something incredible is coming. 61 is coming your way because I'm 61 and frankly, you know, I'm amazingly interesting. You're just kind of like, okay, but I mean, it's better than 10. Trust me, your 18th thing is better than 10. You're going to have a really great time. But, you know, it's like you could not pay me to be you for all the money in the world. You know, being 21, oh my God, please don't make me do that again. So how many of you heard something like, oh, it is lovely, but, you know, it gets better. Each season has its own value. You know, enjoy it, but, you know, be ready to move on. Who heard that? One, right there, okay. Now, how many of you wish you heard that? Okay, all those of you who are under, 18 now, that's your job, is to be that person. Because we're doing this wrong. How we think and how we say things and how we frame the way things are really matters. It is a crime that I've heard so many people say they were told these were the best years of their life, because it's not true. And they're using it to judge their experience in ways that are completely unconstructive. So back to our problem. Now that we understand how we define things really does have an impact, as a matter, what's the issue around success by design? Is it possible? This brings up the question of how we define design. I said that's the important part. So design thinking is the way we think about design at Stanford. That's how we teach it here. Design is the oldest interdisciplinary program at Stanford, 50 years old. It was celebrating its 50th birthday party just a year ago. And for 40 of those years, we were the lunatic fringe. We thought about design kind of differently than the rest of the world. Now we're the hot guys because it's way cool. Design thinking is way in. Finally, they realized we're right. And when you talk about design thinking, well, what is it? Well, it is a kind of thinking, so it's important to recognize there's more than one type of thinking in the world. We got engineering thinking, which is really good at solving its way forward. When you have equations and approaches and methodologies that actually know what they're doing with adequate information, you can actually solve your way forward. In business, you never have the right answer. You never know for sure that your market share is big enough, or your brand is strong enough, or your organization is shaped and operating efficiently enough, but you try to get better and better, so you're optimizing your way forward. Here at Stanford, actually, most of the students are grad students. 8,000 grad students, about 6,000 undergrads, and most of those grad students are in PhD programs, analyzing and researching, tearing things apart, deconstructing them into the smallest possible pieces, and understanding how they interrelate to one another in some kind of way, and hopefully eventually coming out with a really cool thing called the question nobody has an answer to yet. And in design, we build our way forward. We build our way forward because of the nature of the problems we are good at. The only way you can get there is build your way forward. You can't think your way forward. You can't analyze your way forward. You don't have the equations yet. And it turns out there are lots of kind of problems that this is good for, which we call wicked problems. Wicked problems as opposed to tame problems. Wicked problems is a technical term developed by urban planners at Cal back in the 70s. They wrote the original article on the 10 attributes of a wicked problem, which has been sort of pared down to the 6 attributes of a wicked problem by a variety of people and so on. And wicked problems have lots of attributes. We could spend a lot of time on that, but things like it's a one-shot operation. The definition changes in real time. You don't get to do it over again, and you don't necessarily know what you're doing, and the only time you understand the problem is after you solved it. Things like being a parent, helping people figure out their life, and education, which we're talking about tonight. That's a wicked problem. Design thinking has 2 primary components, the core of which is the design process. And the design process, as we teach it here at Stanford, has these 5 steps. We start with empathy, really understand what's going on, human-centered design. It was always a human-centered program. Really understand the people who are doing the work, people receiving the work. We have to really understand that, ethnography, all kinds of psychology, that sort of thing. And then once you've understood what's going on, now you can define what you're doing. You can actually figure out what problem you're solving. You don't start with the problem, you start with understanding. And then you can start having ideas. We have a lot of skills for how to have ideas, how to have more ideas, how to have crazy ideas, to get to the good ideas, all that sort of thing. And then you prototype. You take the better ideas and say, let's go try those things in the real world and see what happens, pick the best of those, test them out, and then start this thing called implementation, where you take designs into reality. The key thing I want to focus on tonight is prototyping. It's probably, I would argue philosophically, it's the heart of design as we talk about it here at Stanford. Prototype iteration. That's Tom and David Kelly. That's David with the glasses and Tom without. The brothers, David is the founder of IDEO. He is the ranking tenured professor of design here at Stanford. That's his brother Tom, who helps him run the company. And they talk about this stuff a lot. And they will remind us, fail often to succeed sooner. Fail often to succeed sooner. Prototyping is critical because when you're working on a wicked problem, you know that you do not know the answer. You know that you don't have enough information. And the best thing you can do is, as quickly as possible, come up with some ideas, turn them into something that will give you some feedback by trying it, and go out in the real world. It's not prototyping just because you're underinformed. And if you had enough data, or you had enough equations, or you had enough science and enough methodology, you could do it right the first time. And a lot of people think that's what design does. Design just does this sloppy stuff because we're underinformed. And that's completely missing the point. When we prototype, we are not just sort of filling in the gap of missing information. When we prototype, what we are doing is we are taking an idea and going out into this incredibly important laboratory called reality, with these incredibly important people called other people we haven't met yet, and trying this thing. We're not just looking for feedback on it. In the process of doing it in the real world, actually doing it and experiencing it ourselves and experiencing them experiencing it, we are actually creating the information that wasn't there before. The prototype iteration creates the ideas we could never have thought up in the first place ourselves. You could sit in a padded room for a year and never think it up, but you could actually go have an idea by doing it in reality. You have to do in order to create. So, success by design, is it possible? Yes. Except, of course, most of the time, people don't mean by design what we are trying to say here tonight. What they mean by design is success by engineering, is it possible? Can you give me a methodology where I can solve this problem and guarantee the outcome? And the answer to that is no. It doesn't work on a wicked problem. Let me illustrate. These are interviews with college students at a career fair answering the question, how is life?
Life's good. Life's great.
Life is awesome.
Amazing.
Life's going well.
Okay, we have happy people. This is good. Same career fair, different question. What are you going to do with your life after college?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I was going to go to med school, but some grades changed that. I think I'm going to go to law school.
My favorite.
I have no idea.
I don't know yet.
I have no idea what I'm going to do after college.
Sometimes I guess I tell myself I don't really have to worry about it when I really probably should be.
Can you engineer success in school? Yes, absolutely. And what you get is a kid who's brilliant at doing school and clueless at doing life. And I think this is where one of the huge temptations lie. Because if you think that lockstep mechanism of doing school will in fact create success at the other end, however you define that, then all you have to do is be good at school. So if you want to believe in that myth, you're not going to have a lot of negative feedback until later. Because the kid gets the good grades and they get into the right school and what have you, or they just freak out, and end up in Wendy's office. So it's real easy to get away with magical thinking for a long time in these people's lives. Maybe one more illustration. I just recently, I hear back from my students, when you take a class from me, you get office hours free for life, which is a good deal because my consulting rates are terrible. And I just got a letter from a recent student about a year and a half out, and obviously anonymous, who is a very successful student in technology, went to work for a very name brand company here in Silicon Valley, about a year and a half in, and she writes back, and she is failing miserably. Absolutely miserably. And doesn't know why, and goes into a long description of what she has done and hasn't done and so on, and ends with, this is not the trajectory that I thought I would be on after having graduated from Stanford. Who told her that Stanford graduation was a trajectory? It's a document. She got it wrong. Now, she actually took my class, so obviously didn't help her well. I mean, I got her late in the day, and she didn't get it. But she did everything right. Everything right, and still doesn't know why it didn't work. We got to stop doing that. We got to stop doing that. So what are we going to do? Okay, we have to go back to our design process. First thing we got to do is accept. Step 0, by the way, is accept. You cannot solve a problem you're not willing to have. We only design in reality. We begin with a real problem. So the first thing you have to accept is people are not tame and cannot be solved. They're wicked problems, not tame problems. A tame problem is build the Golden Gate Bridge. A tame problem is come up with cold fusion. Once we get it, it'll work fine. That's tame. You know, should the kid drop soccer or not? No, that's really hard. It's a really hard question. You can stay up all night on that one. Outcomes of wicked problems are not guaranteed. You can't program your kids, so help students think like designers to build their success, not program them to be winners so that they will turn into something you think will be true and in fact won't. So what's your action item after you do that acceptance? Because all that does is position you properly to address the question. What are you going to do? First place I'd go is to our define step. You have to define what it is you're doing, which means it's time to do a reframe. Reframe is a primary tool we use in design all the time. You need to think this way about something. How about we do this? Reframe your goal. Cultivate curiosity over competition. Instill a mindset of try it instead of watch out or be careful. Encourage failing faster and cheaper if possible, over getting it right. Fall off a couple of low things before that height that will actually damage you, right? Try a curb or a chair before you jump off the building. Adopt an improv point of view, where you do improv all the time in design. And in improv, the first rule of improv is yes and. You're up on stage, you're acting out with somebody, nobody knows what's going to happen next, and you go, oh my goodness, what's going to happen tonight when Helen comes over? And the other person goes, Helen's not coming tonight, what are you talking about? And you go like, okay, I can't go with that. So if you're in an improv skit, you have to say, oh yes, well when Helen comes over tonight, hopefully she'll bring the elephant with her. Oh yes, and the elephant and the dog. And you have to keep going with yes, because that's going to keep the momentum going. So try yes and with your kids or your students. Find a yes and. It takes a lot of work to do that. Reframe your dialogue. Instead of what do you want to be when you grow up, what are you enjoying learning or trying out? Who have you met whose life is interesting? What's going on in the world that upsets you? What grabs your attention? Tell me about something you finally figured out after lots of tries. If you just change the things you say, the rest will start to follow. On this college question, reframe college. Instead of what do you want to major in or where you want to go, what do you want out of college? I teach a course to freshmen. They don't know. Help them not know sooner. How are you thinking through college fit? I taught at Cal for 7 years before I came to Stanford. Had a sophomore sit down and goes, I'm really unhappy. Why? Well, it's really big. Cal's really big. Yeah, that's in the brochure. It's actually in the brochure. What else are you finding? Well, the classes are really hard. Okay. You look applied here, right? Okay. And it's really competitive. Yeah, and it's right in the middle of a city. Yeah. This is news to you. We've been here, and is terribly unhappy. He has no business being there. Well, why did you apply? Why did you come? It's the best. It's the best public school in the country. Did you know anything else about it? No. I knew nothing else about it. How are you anticipating changing your mind in college? Of course you're going to change your mind in college. That thing you think college is about, it won't be. How are you planning now to deal with the shock that the idea you had is, in fact, incorrect? We try to help people reframe what college is at Stanford. Now we're experimenting with a freshman and sophomore class called Designing Your Stanford. And so a Designing Your Stanford student thinks portfolio, not transcript, thinks engagements, not classes, thinks story, not just degree. Change the picture, the frame of what it is we're doing here. That midnight conversation in the hallway about whether or not there is a God is absolutely as important as the summer internship in the A in math. And if you do that, by the way, you can get their attention, and it's not that hard. Change your conversation, and you can empower them.
DYS really encouraged me to do what I love. They tell you a lot to just go after your passions, think about what you're passionate about and just do that for the rest of your life. And for me, it's I'm not afraid of doing that. It's just I don't know what my passion is.
And just being able to talk and engage with other students who are having these thoughts of what do I want to do with my life is really awesome.
Designing at Stanford puts you in this mindset to get the most out of Stanford.
It's a very broad set of tools that are very useful generally, not only in deciding what you want to do at Stanford.
I feel as sophomores, we're still trying to figure out what makes us happy. Designing at Stanford helps you discover yourself.
I definitely think it's going to help me get a lot more out of Stanford, so, what more can you ask?
I'm not trying to sell you Stanford kids, but we make Stanford kids out of people, and they need the same help as everybody else. The nice thing about this is it actually isn't that hard. You can change your game, you can change the outcome. Go for it. Thanks.